Hey there, fifth graders. Today we are going to be turning fractions into decimals using a hundredths grid. Our learning target for today is SOL 5.2a, and our learning target is I can use concrete or pictorial models to show that a decimal and a fraction are equivalent. Now I put some words in red because I thought they were important. That hundredths grid that we're going to be using, that's a pictorial model or a picture. Of course, again, we're going to be using decimals and fractions, and we know that the word equivalent means to show that they are equal. So, here's what you're going to need to be successful. A pencil and some paper. That's it. Are you ready? Let's get started. Before we get started, let's do a quick review. All right, I have some place value squares or base 10s in my hand. What is this called? Right, it's called a flat. What about this one? It's called a rod. And this one, this tiny little piece here is called that's right, a unit. Now, let's say, because we're doing decimals, that my flat represents a whole. This is one whole thing. Well, if you look at my rod, my flat is made up of rods. So if this is one whole, then how much does this represent? It represents a tenth. How do you know that? Right, because there are 10 of them. So if I put 10 of these side by side, it's going to equal to this. So this, if this is my whole, this is going to be equal to 1/10. What if I add 2? Now I have 2/10. What if I add 3? Now I have 3/10. What about now? 4. What is this? Exactly, 4/10. Now, how would I write that? I'm going to get my handy dandy dry erase marker and my whiteboard. It's a little shiny. How would I write that? Well, we know that one whole will just be written 1. But we're talking about this one part of our whole. That would be written 0 because we don't have a whole yet. And 1/10, okay? If I put 2 of these together, that's 2/10 or 0 and 2/10. And we'll add one more. If I put 3 of them together, that would be equal to 0 and 3/10. All right, pause the video right here. If I have, well, after I ask the question, if I have all 4 of these rods, and this flat is my whole, then what is this going to be as a decimal? Pause right here and answer. If you put 4/10, you are correct. Now, this whole is not only made up of 10 rods, but it is also made up of units. How many units would it take to equal this flat? Right, 100. So, if I take 4 of these and line them up, how many units is that going to be? How many units? How many of this would that be equal to? We already said that that's 4/10. So 4/10 then we know is equal to 40 hundredths, because our little units are called hundredths when we're referring to decimals, and this is our whole. Now, if I have 7 units, what would that be as a decimal? What would that be as a decimal? Right, it would be 7 hundredths. All right, now let's do some practice. Let's look at this here. We know that it represents what? Right, the whole. Let's look at this piece here. I see that there are how many rods? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 rods. How many of them are shaded? Right, 2. So the fraction would be 2/10. As a fraction, I would write that 2 fraction bar 10. And then as a decimal, I would put my 0, because I have 0 ones. My decimal point, and then I know I have 2/10. Let's do some more. I want you to pause the video and go ahead and write down the decimal and the fraction for this one. All right, you see 3 shaded in, and we know that there are 10. So my decimal would be 3/10. 3/10, and so would my fraction. All right, here's another practice one. What fraction and decimal do we have for this one? Pause the video and write it down. Correct, 4/10. Now let's look at our hundredths in the same way as we looked at our tenths. And remember, right here we have a hundreds grid. We know that there are 100 units here, and this one shaded in would be equal to 1 of those hundredths. So we call it 1/100ths. We have 0/10ths here, and we have 1/100th shaded in. We can do the same with our thousandths. Again, we have one whole, and inside of each of our hundredths, there are 10 more tiny little boxes, and we call those thousandths. You see in this picture here, we have one of those boxes shaded in, so it would be 1/1000th. Let's look at these 3 fractions here. How would we model them as a fraction and as a decimal? Pause the video here and think about it and write it down. Well, as a fraction, for the first one, we know that that's 1 whole. For the picture in the middle, we know that it is broken into tenths, and I have just one of those tenths shaded. So that would be written as 0 and 1/10. I also have 10 of the hundredths shaded in. So it would be equal to 0 and 10 hundredths. How about these fractions? How would you model them as a fraction, as in a decimal? Pause the video here and think about it. Well, you know that each one of these is 5. 500ths or 50 thousandths that's shaded in here. Then the bottom you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you know that's 65 tenths or 650 thousandths. Pause the video here and go ahead and work on these 3 examples. Okay, for the first one, we know that we're working with tenths because there are 10 parts here. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 shaded in. So as a fraction, I would write that 9 fraction bar 10 or 9 tenths. And as a decimal, I would write that 0 and 9. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but we'll try it. So I have 9 shaded in. And there are 10 altogether, so 9 tenths. All right, let's go over the answers to our mixed practice. You can check your answers with mine. Let's look at the first example. I can see that at the top, I have 1 whole. Here I have 75 squares shaded in, so I have 75 thousandths. Here I have 925 of the 1,000 squares shaded in, so I have 925 thousandths. Here again, I have 1 whole, and I'm working with hundredths. I have 95 of the 100 squares shaded in, so I have 95 hundredths. Here I have 70 of the 100 squares shaded in, so I have 70 hundredths. Again, I have 1 whole. Now I'm looking at 9 of the 10 shaded in, so I have 9 tenths. And here I have 5 of the 10 shaded in, so my answer is 5 tenths. How'd you do? Did you get that? Let's look at these 3 models. Let's look at these 3 models. What do you notice is the same about them? And what is different? Right? This one over here is tenths, this is hundredths, and this is thousandths. But we can see that they are equivalent because you see that they all have the same amount of the 100 that is shaded in. Great job today, 5th graders. Don't forget to come back tomorrow so you can keep the learning going. Bye.